The Republican National Convention came to an end in Milwaukee last night with a 90-minute plus speech from former President Trump. He kicked off that speech talking about the recent attempt on his life before segueing into the more standard Trumpian rhetoric that we've all come to expect. So, has the convention been a success? Where has it left the former president? And what happens next? To discuss all this, we're joined by Republican strategist Whitley Yates. Whitley, welcome.
It's good to be here.
You were in Milwaukee, were you not?
I was in Milwaukee.
How was the atmosphere on the floor during that speech?
I mean, it was tantalizing. People were excited, they were invigorated, they were chanting, and it really just felt like a time where Republicans were coming together. And I think that overall, the entire convention was a huge success.
And in terms of this purported new tone by former President Trump, did you think he struck a new tone, or did you think it was kind of standard Trump stuff?
I would say there were resonances of a softer tone in his speech, but there were also the resemblance of the Trump that we all know. And I think that if he were to come out and be completely different, it would be disingenuous to who he was and people wouldn't believe it. It would feel unauthentic. And so I do believe that there was a softer tone that you could tell, but he is Trump and he's going to be exactly who he is. And I think that that is honestly the best way for him to convey his message.
I actually agree with you for what it's worth. Sorry, Naira, you were trying to get in there. But I mean, I actually don't love this media tendency to constantly find a new Trump or suggest Trump's about to pivot. Trump is Trump and he's always going to be Trump, and roughly half the country hates it and roughly half the country loves it, and that's kind of where it is.
And that's the appeal, like you said, the authenticity, that idea that, yeah, with Trump, you always know what you get. Why then this effort at a softer tone? Because we've heard it talked about, and the RNC also mentioned, you get excerpts of remarks earlier, and that first section of the speech did some of that, and then Trump was himself. So why bother to be anything different right now?
I'm going to be honest. I think with the polarization leading to assassination attempts, it is incumbent upon both leaders in both parties and everyone downstream to have a softer tone, to not demonize each other and to not push fear-mongering so we don't have situations like we've had. And we don't necessarily know the reasoning, but clearly if you are drawn to pull a weapon on a political personality or someone running for office, then you have some pretty strong hate in your heart. And so I think the softer tone is just basically from what has happened in Pennsylvania and wanting to make sure that we're not inciting people to violence against political.
If he can't keep that softer tone, is that going to then be a problem for this polarized moment and this idea that violence is easily incited right now?
I think that having a core message of unity is what is necessary, and that is what he's doing. Even though he is still going to be Trump, he can push unity without uniformity and making it seem like he's not being genuine or unauthentic. And the truth is that you should be able to hold elected officials accountable and it not feel like a blood sport.
But I mean, whenever he talks about crazy Nancy Pelosi, for example, I mean, you would accept that that's not particularly unifying, I'm assuming.
I wouldn't say that that is particularly unifying, but calling her a threat to democracy is different. Utilizing terms like putting her in a bullseye, that's the type of rhetoric that we're trying to eradicate.
But I mean, I don't see what the distinction is that you're making.
You don't think that there's a distinction between placing someone in the bullseye or that they are a threat to democracy is different from calling them crazy?
No, I don't, actually.
Okay, well.
So then, jumping in between the two of you then, the idea of demonizing people, and that's, all right, so crazy maybe is a shade before you get to that next step of what to do about the crazy, right? But it starts with give them a label and then you hint at actions. What about then the rhetoric about immigration? One of his favorite talking points is about talking about how immigrants are a disease. He's used language like vermin. He's used language about what it does to the blood of our country. Now, granted, that's not what he said at the debate, but it was what he said immediately at the rally after. And that Trump is great at playing to the crowd, and the crowd was responding to that. So if you are an immigrant or a migrant watching that, how do you not think that you're a target of this unity?
I mean, I think that you should think that you're a target if you came into this country illegally. That is a criminal act. And so there should be no cover of communication for criminals. If you came into this country illegally and you didn't go through the proper means, you should not be here. And I don't understand why we would need to cover or why we would need to placate to people who are breaking the law to enter this country. I'm confused at why we would need to have softer rhetoric.
It's a misdemeanor offense to cross the border illegally. It's not a felony, and in this country generally we do have that idea of a trial or some sort of justice process before we very rarely condemn people to death. And so the question is, the rhetoric about immigrants and saying that they're poisoning the blood of the country, right? Is there a difference between that and then what incites violence against people who just happen to be brown?
I haven't heard any condemning them to death. He's condemning them to deportation back to where they came from, which is what should have happened already. And so I don't think that it's about having victimized speech towards people who've come into this country illegally when they are victimizing citizens here. They're attempting to protect us. And I think it's important that we're using accurate language to depict not only what they're doing. A misdemeanor is a misdemeanor. You break into my car, that may be a misdemeanor if you don't take anything. But why are we attempting to placate to criminals? I'm not understanding why we are having this soft heart. The truth is that if you want to come into America, there is a process. And by jumping over steps of the process, it's not right. And a president saying that he's going to protect our nation by making sure that that process is upheld should not be considered demonized language.
Okay, so just to confirm then, the calling immigrants as poisoning the blood of the country is not a problem.
I didn't say that calling immigrants or saying poisoning the blood of the country isn't right. What I'm saying is I do not have sympathy for people that come into this country and that purport crimes upon our citizens who did not utilize the process necessary through immigration to come here accurately. And anyone saying that they want to deport them or to remove them from this country is doing us a service as Americans.
Obviously, shifting gears a bit, Whitley, there's obviously the issue of President Biden and whether he's going to survive as the Democratic nominee. How much of a conversation topic was that at the convention, like aside from whatever was said from the podium?
I'm going to be honest, the conversations around Biden were not about whether or not he was going to sustain in his campaign. It was really centered around who's been running this country, because it's kind of clear that his cognition didn't just decline, that it's been on the decline. And so the question that on everyone's mind is who's been making the decisions, who has been the person that has been kind of guiding this entire administration, because we know it's not been him. And it doesn't necessarily matter, and this is what I heard from a lot of sources and a lot of delegates, it doesn't matter who's at the top of the ticket on the left, because the policies are going to be the same and the administration is going to run the same. So it doesn't matter who they switch out. It doesn't matter who AI fakes or Kamala Harris or anybody else, because they believe President Trump is going to win no matter what.
And is the not switching out, did you hear people in terms of talking about Biden leaving, that Kamala, is Kamala for the GOP a more desirable opponent because she'd be easier to beat in some way? Is that the thinking?
Absolutely not. I think she's less desirable because when looking at the results of how she was VP and how the border crisis, which she was tasked to handle, has been mishandled, absolutely not. They see her as someone who is going to continue to purport the exact same issues that have led us here with the migrant and illegal immigrant crisis.
Do you think anyone at the convention was a surprise, either for good or for bad? Like, was there anyone who either outperformed or underperformed expectations?
I would say that the vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance, was phenomenal. I think he used storytelling very well. And I think that there were just moments where Americans could come behind and find semblance or some type of common ground in his story. People from all walks of life, whether that be those who have people dealing with addiction in their family, those who've grown up in poor socioeconomic status. I mean, I just felt like he really spoke to the fabric of this country, and I think that he exceeded very well. I mean, obviously, baby dog was talked about heavily. And then you also have Trump's beautiful granddaughter, Kai, who I think just kind of humanized him for just one moment, but also let us know that like he's still a Trump and he tries to get in my head and make me lose when we play golf together, because you could just kind of visualize Trump doing that and not wanting to lose, even if it's to his granddaughter. But I think overall, the speakers were very interesting, very unique, very diverse, I would say. And it wasn't necessarily the speakers that we expected that created the greatest resonance and had the best impact. It was the unexpected speakers that I believe created that level of impact.
Did anyone fall flat or no?
Did anyone fall flat? Not that I saw. I think everyone went up there. They had their own specific mission of what they wanted to say and what they wanted to do and what they wanted to incite and make people feel. And I think everyone was pretty spot on. I don't think anyone flatlined. I actually believe when Trump said it in his speech that everyone did well, that he was being quite honest.
The humanizing of Trump. Traditionally, the first lady or the first lady nominee is the person who most humanizes the man at the top of the ticket. Melania spoke at the first convention when Trump won that one. She didn't speak at this one. What's up with that?
You know, she released a statement, and I think we have to consider this from a different perspective. She's a former first lady who just watched her husband be shot at. He could have lost his life. And to be back out 7 days later in front of large crowds, I don't think we should expect her to be standing on that stage and next to him, especially considering where she grew up and the war-torn nature of those environments. And so I think her releasing her message and I think her being there is important, but saying that, well, you need to humanize him and you need to get up there and you need to do all of these things, I think that we are placing what we want to see on her and not what she's comfortable with.
So just as a point of clarity, she is by origin Eastern European. Her country has not been war-torn for generations, but she was on the campaign trail the first time around, and she has not. It's not that she was deciding because of this assassination attempt not to participate. She hasn't been on the campaign trail at all. She just hasn't been a vocal female partner presence for the president. And is that going to be a challenge in the coming months when the female vote is going, the idea of women's rights are on the ballot for people across the political spectrum? Is her absence going to be a challenge for the Trump campaign?
I don't think so, because I think that plays into identity politics to say, well, you need a woman standing beside you so that women can see a woman and feel like it's okay to vote for you. He's doing well in the polls. He's doing well when he is, getting donors. As he said, they've raised even money for the victims from PA. So if the donors are happy and the polls show that he is ahead in the polls, ahead in most states, and is on a path of victory, I don't understand why having a symbol of this femininity next to him is necessary for him to win when he's doing well without it. We know that she supports her husband. We read it in her statement. And so that should be good enough.
That is a certainly different type of first lady. And I personally welcome her carving her own path forward in this.
Whitley Yates, thanks for joining us. Thanks for that recap on the Republican National Convention. And we'll be back with more Rising after this.